Tango Audio.
If you enjoy the stories on this podcast, you'll also like the stories in my book, Filmmaking Confidential, which isn't just for filmmakers, but also all artists and really any entrepreneur. Thank you for supporting the show and sharing it with your friends. Now here's today's show. I'm Steve Balderson, and you're listening to the Filmmaking Confidential podcast. In this podcast, we meet with filmmakers, writers, actors, artists, and other notables. Today's guest is magician Elliott Hunter. Elliott was named an Olympian of magic and will represent North America at the Fédération Internationale Société de Magique, the 2022 World Olympics of Magic. By sharing personable stories combined with cutting-edge music and illusion, he uses magic to remind his audiences that even the seemingly impossible can be made possible, and no matter the obstacle, it can be overcome. I've seen him perform, and it is breathtaking.
Your show was incredible.
Oh, thank you.
It was really fascinating because I, as a kid, was really, really inspired by magic. And over the course of time, it just sort of was forgotten. And to some degree, what I do as a filmmaker is similar because I'm creating illusions and worlds and people, it's a similar part of the brain for me as a creative person, but very, very different at the same regard. But when I saw you, it was so good. I mean, it was so incredible. It just was an ignition of inspiration and creativity.
So happy to hear that. I'm so glad it struck that chord with you, because that's ultimately my goal whenever I present magic. And that's just kind of bring back that kind of primal, primitive feeling that I felt as a kid when I saw my first couple of magic shows. And the magic that I'm really inspired by and that I carved my niche into is what you saw at the Magic Castle, which is the stage manipulation is what we call it, with cards, billiard balls and whatnot. And this is the kind of magic that I fell in love with as a kid and wanted to pursue. So I'm really happy that I was able to kind of ignite that same passion within you.
How many people, do people come up to you and tell you, how does it feel to hear an overwhelming sense of that kind of a reaction from so many people? It's
very rewarding, I have to be honest. And it's and the Magic Castle has some of the best magic audiences in the world because people are specifically there to watch magic. So having people constantly come up, it's a very rewarding feeling after having done this for about 15, not 20 years quite, but about 15 years, having to kind of see that evolution since I started magic, and people's like, oh, this is kind of cute, to wow, that was really inspiring. It's hugely rewarding.
Has anybody ever heckled you?
All the time.
Really?
So I would say, as a kid, sometimes cynical audiences tend to be the older crowd. Some of the worst audiences I've had have to be I did a couple corporate events for middle-aged bankers, when I was in college. And it's they kind of just want to go home. And it's no, you have to sit through this show that your company paid for. It's so I've had people select a card and say it's the wrong card and things like that. But I honed my close-up magic at college parties when I was in college. I would go and wait for people to get to a certain level of intoxicated, and then I would practice my card magic. and I learned a lot of ins and outs and how to navigate situations based on dealing with tripping intoxicated people.
That's hilarious. Do you remember the first show you saw?
Yeah, I do. His name was Sterling, and he was a magician, and he was a prodigy student of my now magic teacher. So he and I share the same teacher. And I saw his show at the public library in my small hometown in Washington State. And he was about 14 at the time when he presented the show, and he was winning a bunch of magic competitions and awards. But as the story goes, I saw his show at the library and wanted to learn more about magic. And then about 2 or 3 years later, no, about 4 years later, when he was in high school, he presented a full theater show at one of the local theaters in the next town over. And just seeing the elevation in his quality of performance inspired me to pursue it further, to see just like how cool, like this guy was like a superhero, you know, and just to see like how dynamic and how cool his show could be, that magic isn't just like top hats and rabbits, you know.
What did he do in particular that really just like floored you?
His combination between music and magic, which is something that I was able to draw a lot into my show, and that he drew from a lot of inspirations that were his inspirations as well. So the combination to make magic more of a dynamic art form, that it wasn't just like talking the whole time. It was like utilizing magic to create, or utilizing music within the magic to help support the emotion underneath each piece.
Cool.
I think that was really what hit home.
And yours was the show that I saw had a lot of like musical heart to it.
Yeah, so I consider the music to be the soundtrack of my show, and it's literally the entire show is scored to an extent. There's almost never a spot in the show without music. It's either supporting what I'm talking about on stage for two reasons. One is that, have you ever watched a movie that doesn't have music? Yeah. I have. It's terrible. If you watch any cinema, and I know that's what your background is in, if you watch any kind of movie, there's always music behind the characters, even if they're speaking, or if there's an action scene or a dramatic scene, and you choose music to navigate how you want your audience to feel. But sometimes it also that statement contradicts itself, that the moments in the show that don't use music end up being the most important, because then you see the difference and you learn the power of the pause. So by utilizing music to create the emotion through the piece, and then strategically detracting the music, you can create a much more powerful experience for the audience, I would say. Also, at the Magic Castle, I don't know what showtime you saw, but once you get to the 11:30 show, everyone's kind of stumbling and tripping over their words because we have 5 bars in the building. So music creates a soundtrack to my show, so that my soundtrack isn't people clinking glasses and falling over and laughing on each other, you know?
Totally. Yeah. I saw the earlier one, and in fact, we weren't meant to go there. My friend, it was his birthday, and we just inexplicably, there were 5 of us, and there just happened to be 5 empty seats. And so we thought, great. And so we just did it. For
people who weren't able to come see the castle, you can say, hey, here's the headlining spot. So you can watch that video. You can watch the full show. I put it up publicly online, the show that you saw, actually.
Oh, cool. Great. Yeah, because the other thing about your show, which I really loved, was there was so much going on that it was like, I was saying this out loud. I was with my friends, and I just was like, no. And then I was like, no, like it was, and then there was something else you did, like, no, like how? And then it's just like, you give up in the, I can't believe what I'm seeing. And you just ride with it. And then when you're riding with it, it's like, it's over, you know what you just experienced. But then I was trying to communicate to someone who wasn't there, and I couldn't, because I couldn't separate. I just was like, I don't even know what it was I saw, but it was amazing. You know, it was like one of those things, which is so great.
And I think, to echo that point, that's why I love working with Pop Hayden so much. He and I shared that contract, and there's such a brilliant juxtaposition there between our material and our styles. He did 3 magic effects in 20 minutes, and I think I did 15 in the first minute and a half, you know? Right. And so when you multiply that over the course of a 20-minute set, it kind of echoes what you're saying there. There's so much going on. And I also try, like you do in a movie, is to create the highest highs and the lowest lows within my own set in order to ensure that it has a dynamic flow to it. So that, you know, you have your logical flash opening that grabs the attention, and then you have the lyrical middle with the levitation, and then the punchy closer with the cards. And it creates what you would do in a movie. You have the first action scene to get somebody's attention, and then you have the lyrical love interest in the middle, and then you have the punchy closer that wants people like wanting more, you know?
Tell me a little bit about the process, not exactly how you're doing the illusions, but rather how you're structuring the show. Right.
It's what it first comes down to is who's the audience, who am I performing for? What's the venue and the performing conditions? Because that determines a lot of the material that I can perform based on, how the lighting is there lighting, is there sound support and whatnot. And then we have to eliminate all of the practical constraints first before we can go into designing the show. So if I design a show that uses a ton of cargo, like a metric ton of cargo, I can't check that onto airline bags. Whereas when I did the Magic Castle, I was flying from Denver, Colorado first with 2 airline bags, and I had to ship my illusion via ground freight. So I have to eliminate all the physical constraints first, and then I can go into designing the material and placing things in a logical position. So once I have my time constraint, I then select what's going to be the best and the most effective opener for this audience, what's going to grab their attention first. And then how am I going to be able to know the audience enough to be able to tell them a story that they need to hear? So in the case of the Magic Castle, it was just after New Year's. So I could share the story of how to focus on your goals and whatnot and your systems and that message that goes with the levitation. And then how can I close the show that will leave people wanting more and will make them remember the show and create a memory that they can, like, the last thing, the moments that people remember the most are the beginning of the show and the biggest spectacle. So they remember the first 10 seconds you're getting judged on stage. So within that moment, you need to perform magic. And then to grab the attention of the room, and then how do you make them remember you after the show?
Yeah. And I feel like, I don't know if this is true, but my memory is that you ended, it's like you just went up, 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 and then it was like, boom, over. Is that the case?
So I try to pace it with the Magic Castle, especially pacing a 45-minute show. It kind of needs to be over before it starts, and people look at their watches and they go, holy crap, it's been 45 minutes, not like, oh my gosh, it's only been 30 minutes, and people are like checking their watches. So the Magic Castle is a little bit different because you need to kind of gradually increase the energy and end on like your strongest note, which I do with the cards. And then in the middle, we have the lightheartedness with the emoji face, and then the levitation in the middle that creates kind of the dramatic, kind of lyrical center of the middle that people kind of gravitate toward once you have their attention. And then I ramp up the end with when I did the rings and the cards toward the end of that set. Because really, when I'm doing a longer form show, when I can really expand the middle and I have my own audience for an hour and a half that aren't drinking, it's easier to kind of do that. But when you're in a nightclub in Hollywood, you need to keep the energy like 110% the whole time.
Do you find that the audiences are different between the ones that are drinking versus the ones that are totally stone cold sober and watching with like a different eye?
100%. And they actually, they teach us, they have an entire lecture on this at the Magic and Mystery School, of which I'm a student. And they talk about the difference between a thinking audience and a drinking audience, and how you need to have two, you might have one piece of material, but you need 2 separate presentations that will appeal to both. So the Magic Castle is a heavy drinking audience. So I can't open up and I have some pieces that are 5 minutes long, but there's only one piece of magic because there's an intricate story and a script, and it's more important that I share that story with the audience. But that doesn't go over as well at the Magic Castle because people forget something you said 2 minutes ago. And even though not everyone drinks at the Magic Castle, everybody can gravitate toward the energy of the room because they pack people in, and they pack, sober people next to drinking people, and the energy is kind of contagious. However, when I'm speaking, I did a show for Sony back in June where I had to customize my material to promote their new blood analyzer for their plasmapheresis, I believe, like light spectroscopy or something like that. And so I had to read like the manuals of their new instrument, and then I had to customize my magic to like integrate with their sales meeting. So that's a heavy like thinking audience mid-afternoon like brunch presentation that I presented for them that like was focused on their product. So they were still gravitated toward it, but people like people at the Magic Castle or at a nightclub don't care. Sure. Magic first.
Is magic real?
Yes. Now, it could be a controversial statement because everyone's like, oh no, you hold the coin in the other hand. The way we talk about real magic is every piece that you create in your show, and not everyone has the same outlook, but in my opinion, every piece I create in my show starts out as an idea in one of these notebooks. And the first idea comes from a story. and some sort of inspiration. And a lot of times, 90% of the time, it's a real event that happened in my life. So we can create magic that works more as like an educational medium and a way to communicate a message towards people that could be applicable in their own life. So like, I would assume that for you, magic is real because of the inspiration that you felt after seeing that show, and it's something that's like not creatable in any sense of the word. So in the physical sense, that could be a controversial statement, but in the emotional sense that people leave a dynamic show, it's something that really impacted them deep to their core. I believe that's the strongest piece of magic. So when you can create a story utilizing your magic that comes across as real and makes you a more authentic character, I don't think there's anything more real than that.
That's beautiful. Well said. I think that's also the case with memories of just in real life anyway. You know, I grew up in the same household as my brother and sister. And if I think back to certain memories, I remember a situation or an event totally differently than they do.
Right.
But which one of us is remembering the correct way?
100%. If you picture a soda can or a pill bottle or something, if you shine a light on it from one angle, you'll see a circle. And if you turn that flashlight 90 degrees, you'll see a square cast on the other wall. Yeah. It's your perception and how people remember it. It's how you were saying how you couldn't explain my show to the next person if they weren't in the room. Right. It's how you perceived the show that makes magic real, and what you take away from it.
Is it important as a magician and an entertainer? Well, let's first define those two things, because I read that you consider yourself beyond just a magician.
And I think that's an important distinction to draw, because at the end of the day, you're an entertainer. You're somebody who you need to be able to communicate your message beyond who you are as a magician. Magician it's not what defines you. It's your job title. It's what you do, but it's not who you are. You are an entertainer. Robert Houdin, who was the magician who inspired Harry Houdini, was famous for saying that a magician is an actor playing the role of a magician. And there's so much more that goes into presenting magic than just deceiving you, like mentally and physically. If you can deceive someone while sharing a story that ties into it, and the best example I can give is Eugene Berger, who was my teacher for the last 3 years of his life, I believe, after I met him. And he was a magician from Chicago who would take a simple magic effect and like a torn or restored piece of thread, and then tie it into a story about life and death, and how in Hindu mythology you had Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and how they would make the world expand and go back together. And by making a magical effect that can touch someone's heart, touch their soul, and literally make them create a memory for themselves, it's not something that I created. It's something that everyone in that room created together, and a memory that it would be totally different if you were the only one sitting in the audience that night at the Magic Castle, because I believe a part of what you remember is also the energy in the room and how everyone interacted with the entertainer on stage. I would say beyond being a magician, you need to be able to present magic technically well, but also connect emotionally with your audience, because like any entertainer, if you don't connect with your audience, you'll completely fall flat.
Right. As an entertainer who happens to also be a magician, when did you find, or are you still finding, your perspective, your perception, your place in the world, and how you see out?
I think it's always changing with everybody. And if you're not consistently working on that, then you're doing a disservice to your audience. If you're not changing who you are, if you're not necessarily who you are, but if you're not changing your perspective, if you're not changing how you view your show and your material, you'll end up dated very quickly, especially in this time where like entertainment is consumed like by the second, how content is created and consumed, and it's in and out. It's very different. You know, if you try to do a magic show in 2022 that played really well in the 90s without changing anything, something's going to fall flat. I guarantee it. Because everything is different from 30 years ago. Can you believe that? It's 30 years ago. But also the fact I'm 23, so I can't say I know everything about life death, whatnot, I am still finding who I am as a person. And if I can't define myself as a person, it's hard to define yourself as a person on stage. So it's always, it's constantly malleable, changing who you are, and like trying material and fail forward fast so that you try material on stage. Oh, that didn't work. I'm going to go a different direction. And that's why some of the best rehearsal is just performance for a live audience.
I love that. Yeah. When I'm directing a movie, I typically shoot the rehearsal between the actors, because there's sometimes magic that happens and you can't fake it, and you can't go back and redo it again because it just happened,
Right. And there are moments, like I film almost every show that I do still. And with the extent, like if I'm doing a week of shows, I'm not filming every single one of them. I'll film maybe the first one and the last one and make changes as we go. But what this also tells me is I can use that video to listen to the audience. And they are your biggest critics. They will tell you, they won't necessarily say, hey, that didn't work, but you can listen to how they're responding. And if they don't respond well, something didn't work. Or if they don't, and then what can you do to change that in such a way that it will be receptive with that specific audience?
Do you ever have like a double camera setup where you can do like a split screen and watch their reactions at the same time as you're watching what you're doing?
Not a whole lot, because a lot of times, and that's a good idea. Maybe I'll apply that the next time I film. That's a really good call. I didn't even think about that, but I mostly do it via vocal reaction. Because that's the emotion that I try to elicit in my show and keep people on their feet and keep the energy going. And if I have a dead audience, which I've done some college shows that started at like 11 at night at the end of orientation week. So these kids are like sleep deprived and dead. And my goal and like my job, and as soon as they see somebody who might be dozing off or asleep in the audience, regardless of my show, if they see that person dozing off, other people in the audience will see that person, assume the show is boring, and follow suit.
Yeah.
It's interesting how energy kind of changes. So my goal is to keep everybody in the show engaged. So I'll literally say at the top of the show, if I have a dead audience, my line is usually something like, throughout the show, you'll notice that I run on a continuous loop of energy. The more energy you feed me, the more I will feed back to you, and will continually grow the show as an exponential curve of energy. So everybody, let me hear you make as much noise as possible. And what this does, and I don't say that all the time because sometimes I have a stellar audience. I don't think I said that once at the Magic Castle. I tell them at the top of the show, like, hey, you play as much as this experience as I do. This isn't a movie. There's no fourth wall here. This is our show, not my show.
Oh, that's good. I love thinking about it that way, because it is totally a shared experience.
And in Magic, there's, I go back to the Magic Castle because that's what you saw recently, even though I was coming out into the audience. There's 3 times during the show when I'm physically in the audience, and the energy follows that way. So now instead of the energy being over here, the energy is like in the middle of the room. And then I'm giving spurts of energy to people in various ends of the room. There's the guy in the front row who gets the emoji face. There's the people with the linking rings and whatnot. And so these are ways to channel the energy throughout the room so that the room, it's not static. It's constantly moving and changing. And that's part of how the pacing works in the show as well, is that it's over kind of before it starts.
Do you like that size of room? Something that's kind of big, but still small?
It depends on the material I'm doing. The Magic Castle is designed to be the best magic theater in the world because they're doing, 30 magic shows a week since 1963. So they know how to build a room around magic. It's a great room because the energy gets packed in, similar to a comedy club. You don't sit sporadically spread out in the room of a comedy club because laughter is contagious. So they pack you into the room so that you can, be really close to the guy next to you. And if he's enjoying the show, you're going to enjoy the show. So the Magic Castle is great in controlling the audience in that regard psychologically. Larger audiences also come with huge rewards as well. So versus if I'm working like a 1,000-seat theater, I have to adjust the material a bit, but the Magic Castle is still one of the best rooms in the world. So I find my happy medium in it's really any theatrical space. And if I have a smaller audience, that's okay. But like a 30-person audience in the Magic Castle feels way better than a 30-person audience in a 1,000-seat theater.
Sure.
Especially if we're selling out in COVID times, selling out in COVID times is like 50% capacity. It's like, it's killing me. But I also love being able to perform on big theaters and stages and whatnot. That's been my passion since I was a kid.
magician Elliott Hunter. Another great episode is a visit with the Asylum.
It exploded because big celebrities like Patton Oswalt or Mia Farrow and these other quirky, weird people started tweeting, I'm watching a crazy movie. What the hell's going on? What the hell is Sharknado? And then that started snowballing to everyone else just talking about it at the same time.
You can hear my full interview with the Asylum at filmmakingconfidential.com in our archives or by subscribing for free to this podcast. We'll be right back with Elliott Hunter. Stay with us. Now, back to our conversation with the Olympian of magic, Elliott Hunter.
Can you sustain a financially independent life by being a magician?
It depends on how hard you're willing to work. So some of the, and this is the biggest question in Hollywood, you know, can I be an actor? Can I be a producer? And the chances are it's like, you don't know you don't know when you're going to get your big break. You don't know if you'll get your big break. So how hard are you willing to work? The way I put it is, if I'm losing work to somebody else, then I'm not working hard enough. But I have the blessing of saying that in the entertainment industry, because magic is such a tight niche that we're not a commodity. We're in somewhat sparse supply. So there's a million musicians who can play a piano beautifully, but you can't brand yourself off of that because people want the music. However, as a magician, most of the time people are hiring you because they want you. They want Elliott Hunter. They want somebody in the market because they saw the show once. They know how cool it's going to be. They know how it's going to affect their event. So I say it's definitely possible. There are people doing it. And the question I have to reciprocate is, how hard are you willing to work to make it work? So just like anything, if you are constantly innovating and creating new material, David Copperfield just crossed the $1 billion mark 2 years ago. He's the first billionaire magician in history. And the best advice I ever heard is he's saying no one came knocking at his door. No one rang his doorbell and say, hey, David Copperfield, do you want this $100 million contract? You know, he worked his butt off and lost money every time he did a magic special in order to become a household name. And then his business strategy between touring shows, after he became a household name on the television specials, he could then start touring shows and buying out theaters by himself and then doing 2 shows a day. So he breaks even on the first show and the second show is all profit. And his brilliant business strategy over his several decades of entertainment has paved the way to him being the most wealthy magician in the world. However, he worked harder than anyone else in the industry to get there. Penn and Teller, they don't just sit around being famous. They are constantly, every single week on their off nights, they're working with magic consultants. My teacher is one of them, to create new material for their Las Vegas show. And that's why they're the longest running Vegas contract show in history, I believe, at the Rio. Don't quote me on that. But I know they're one of the only people in Las Vegas who aren't four-walling, which I know is a term in the cinematic industry as well.
Yeah.
I can name Matt Franco, worked his butt off, you know. The way he put it, he was being successful as a college magician. And for those viewers who don't know, Matt Franco won America's Got Talent back in 2015, I believe, as a magician, one of the first magicians to win AGT. And the way he put it is he worked his whole life to get famous overnight. He was grinding. He was doing okay for himself, doing well in the college market. And then overnight, he went on America's Got Talent to get some magic promo video material to add to his resume. And then he just kept getting higher and higher and higher, you know, and they liked him. So it's really how hard are you willing to work? I know there's a long-winded answer, but it's something that I've had to focus on a lot because I used magic to put myself through college.
Oh, cool. Explain more a little bit.
Yeah, so I went to Cal Poly. Sure. I went to Cal Poly. I graduated back in June with an engineering degree, actually. And but that whole time I was sacrificing parties and sleep and a lot of things in order to do my engineering homework and then do shows on the weekends. And I would do my homework on the airplane or backstage at the Magic Castle or wherever I happened to be working that week or at my hotel room. So I was constantly working my butt off in order to design material that not necessarily design material, but design my schedule around being able to perform and financially, create a brand for myself and create a market in my area while putting myself through college so that I didn't have to worry about student loans or student debt or anything. I literally just worked my butt off so I didn't have to worry about paying back student debt.
Are you still swimming?
On and off. I swam in a past life. I was an aggressive competitive swimmer. And I swim to maintain physique, I'll put it. In a past life, I was a very aggressive competitive swimmer. And nowadays, I swim to keep maintenance up.
Cool.
When I was a senior in high school and I was writing essays to get college scholarships, I had to, for one exercise, I had to total up how many hours I was swimming a week, and it was over 20. So when I was in high school, I was swimming over 20 hours a week between getting up at 5 a.m. and doing a workout and doing double, sometimes triple workouts every day. And I had a really good coach who taught us like passion and discipline to hold within a sport. And what constantly drives you coming back. And the biggest quote, because I've had to draw back into that recently, as as my lifestyle has changed and as I've graduated college and whatnot, how to keep finding new ways to stay motivated and disciplined. And I think the biggest takeaway is like the most successful people aren't motivated the whole time, but they're still willing to put in the work when they're not motivated. And that stands up higher than people who are motivated all the time. Because if you're not motivated to go to the gym, most people won't go. But if you can still go to the gym, even though you're not motivated, that's when you're going to make the progress. Michael Phelps would say that the best days to go to practice are the days that you really don't want to go to practice, because that's when you learn the most about yourself and when you can train yourself to be habitual in your practice. So I think that goes back to what I would say when I present the levitation is it's not focusing on your goals, it's focusing on your system and what incremental digestible steps can you take every single day, not even thinking about your long-term goal. So if I want to, in swimming, if I wanted to drop 2 seconds off of one of my races, I wasn't going to focus on 2 seconds every day. I was going to focus on going to practice every single day and working out various muscle groups and practicing skill sets every single day so they became habitual, that I didn't have to think about it when it came moment to try to accomplish that goal.
Cool. How can you do magic virtually easily? Is it not easy, or is it?
It was not easy at first. I don't think people realized how well magic plays on a virtual medium until we hit the pandemic. We're like, oh, this can actually work. And it's not, and the magic I would present on Zoom when I was doing those shows, it's completely different from what you would see in a live environment. But the benefit is you don't have anyone's head blocking your view. Literally everybody has a front row seat. So I believe magic on virtual mediums opened way more doors than it closed. I know a lot of entertainers had one of their most successful years ever during the pandemic, and some of their highest paid shows were virtual. But I could now do a show in Colorado and then minutes later do a show in India, and that was never possible before. Magic physically, magic has been presented on television and for the camera for decades now. And it's just like condensed to the point where everyone has a TV studio in their house. And so now you can perform magic up close, and your close-up magic becomes as big as a piece of stage magic. Mm. So if you select your material wisely and you present it well, it can play just as well. The only thing you miss is the energy of the audience, because you don't hear how other people are responding. You have to supply 100% of the audience without any give back from the audience, and then the people who are watching the show also don't feel that same energy in the room. And that's one thing you can't recreate, and that's why I don't think live entertainment will ever go away. Right. So like you can listen to an artist 100 times on Spotify, but I guarantee you're still going to see them in concert when they come to your town.
Sure.
Because the energy in the room is different. They have the lasers, they have, 100 people moshing in the center. It's a crazy experience that's more memorable than the music itself.
When you go to see magic, do you actually go to see magic? Let me ask that again.
Yeah, all the time.
Okay. Well, okay. When you go see magic, do you let yourself ride it for an experience, or do you like study it?
That's a hard question because sometimes I can't control that. And some people are really good at controlling that and like what context you watch it in. I love going into watching a magic show in an ignorant headspace. Ignorant being that like I don't want to try to unpack what they're doing. I don't want to figure out what they're doing. You have to be in two very different mindsets to watch something in critique versus for entertainment value. So if I want to watch magic, I try to go in with an ignorant experience or an ignorant headspace, unless the entertainer themselves have asked me to give them some sort of feedback that I need to change my mindset. And then it's really hard if I've been watching it in an entertainment mindset and then they come up to me afterwards, hey, do you have any thoughts? I don't know. I wasn't watching it that way. Let me see it again, you know? Next week, I'll be in the middle of Tennessee, in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. There's a magic convention that I'm performing in a gala show for, and they invited me to be a guest judge in their magic competition. So instead of watching the magic as a show, I need to watch it in a critical headspace and literally provide numeric scores for the different categories, you know, entertainment value, technical skill, and then I don't have the sheet in front of me, but similar to how they're going to be judging the Olympics, the World Championships of Magic in July.
When you have gone under the perspective of being a creator of magic, do you then either try to figure out, have you ever been so blown away you had to figure it out, or? That's it.
Interesting question, because I think that attitude as well has changed as I have matured and gotten older and more experienced within magic. I've realized like when I was first getting into magic and first like surrounded by pros and going to conventions as a kid and performing and competing in magic competitions, if I saw something in a gala show that I couldn't figure out, I wanted to know, moreover, so that I could try to present the same effect in my show because I thought it was cool. And that's not always kosher, because if it's a proprietary effect or something that somebody else created that they haven't released legitimately on the market, that's something you have to stay away from. However, if it's something that's like legitimately out there and they had a stellar presentation for it, you can take that material, learn it, and present it your own way. However, nowadays, when I go watch a magic show, if I'm genuinely fooled by something, and in stage magic, that doesn't come that often. So if I'm genuinely fooled by something, I appreciate it more. And then I try not to know, because I miss the ignorance that I had as a kid. In close-up magic, I'm not as well versed in close-up magic as I am stage. So I'm consistently getting fooled by methods in close-up magic because I'm not as familiar. Just as close-up magicians might be fooled by stage magic because they don't know the fundamental principles at stake. But I'm more ignorant when it comes to close-up magic. So that stuff, that a lot of times close-up magic messes with my head and I can't figure it out. And more often than not, I don't want to know because I appreciate the ignorance.
That's beautiful. In the points at which you've ever said, oh, I want to figure that out, has it ever led you to discovering something totally different and totally new, proprietary on your own?
I would say yes and no. And it comes from methods. It comes from ways of being able to take a principle that's already applied and then change that in such a way that it applies to you uniquely. And I have to admit, I don't have a huge resume when it comes to creating my own magic effects like some of the other pros in the industry do. I haven't written a book or anything. I don't have a ton of proprietary material, but what I do, because I've focused more on the entertainment aspect and how to make it unique to me in other ways, how to make it affect the audience on an emotional level. So in the physical sense, there's been a couple of times where I've taken an effect that already existed and altered it to a way that will make it unique. And there are moments in my act where it's like, oh, I've never seen this done. I can make a ball shoot out of my case instead of having it produced in my hand or something like that. I can make 2 flags appear instead of 1 because 1 is the classic method, and I can just modify the methods to where I can build the apparatus to make it work. A lot of the magic I use myself, I I built myself or designed myself as well because of my background in engineering. So I can take a specific effect, like the levitation, for example, how to take a concept that already exists in magic and improve on it in such a way that it works better for me on stage and it's more effective in presentation for the audience. There's one other thing I wanted to circle back to in that statement, but in terms of what I wanted to say, going back to like the financial viability and marketability, people, and this kind of ties together in that most people aren't going to remember the magic you performed. They're going to remember how you made them feel. People inherently are selfish creatures, so they're going to hire you for your event because they're going to make the host of the party look super stellar for bringing in this cool entertainer that made their party really cool. So people want you for the memories that you will provide other people. And that memory doesn't necessarily come from a physical magic effect. It comes from an emotion that you're able to create. So in what I've been able to create on stage, it's been more valuable for me to focus on the messaging and the metaphors behind the magic I present in order to create a more profound experience on the audience, instead of creating an effect that they're just going to remember because they were fooled. Because I realized early on that magic is like giving someone a Rubik's Cube who has never held a puzzle before, and they get irritated and throw it away. And you're giving them a puzzle without a solution, which leaves them irritated, most people. And if they're in the mindset of trying to figure it out, they're left irritated because they can't figure it out. And being irritated is not a valuable form of entertainment. A valuable form of entertainment is something that makes you cry, that makes you laugh, that makes you enjoy the moment. That's beyond the magic that you're presenting. In the entertainment industry, if you can find a niche in your market that is not being served, you will ultimately be financially successful. So there's a magician named Cody Clark who he's mildly on the spectrum, and he is an advocate for autism. So he realized there is no magician presenting magic that is sensitive to people with autism. So he creates magic that is appealing and that works for a market that is overly sensitive. And he capitalizes. He's the only magician creating magic for people with autism. And that's a huge market that has never been served before, and probably never will be served after he's out of the market. So he was able to capitalize on a market that he knew well about and create shows that were valuable for that market in order to make himself successful.
What's your statement on a person who argues that doing such things is quote unquote selling out or lacking any artistic or creative skill to do so?
To focus on a market?
Uh-huh.
I would disagree wholeheartedly, because what you are doing is making your magic more accessible to people who have never been able to see it before. So in anything, I would consider that the opposite of selling out. You are buying in to the concept of creating magic and creating an entertainment experience for people who otherwise wouldn't have been able to experience that. So you've been able to find a niche. And I mean, he was following his passion. He wasn't following money. Money came afterward in that example. And that's the biggest advice, is if you follow your passion to create what you are passionate about, and then you can apply that to a market, the money will come. I wouldn't call that selling out. I'd call that buying in.
What makes you curious?
What makes me curious? I would say magic is the best way to make you curious, because especially in the age of technology and information overload, people are, I can literally know the answer to a question I have in 5 seconds. So forms of entertainment such as magic keep curiosity and creativity alive, simply because it's a minute where you can accept that you don't know something. And then suddenly you're reminded that, oh, wait, we still don't know everything in this universe, even though I think I do. They still haven't proven gravity. They know it exists. They know that the acceleration of gravity is 9.81, but they don't know where gravity comes from. They don't know why it exists. They know that we have it. And then we're going to do all our math at 32.2 feet per second squared. So we still, but people don't know that, because we assume we know everything. And so I think what makes me curious is the action of asking questions, because what's scary in today's day and age is the top result on Google isn't necessarily controlled by its accuracy, but is controlled by the number of clicks it gets. And that populates it higher and higher on the list. So the more times that's literally the more people say something, the more true it becomes to other people. And then the magic word abracadabra literally translates roughly to it is created as it is spoken. So Google is literally a magic trick.
That's cool. I mean, it's not cool. It's cool.
It's scary. It's cool, scary, but it's scary. It's scary because we're so focused on my dad. My dad's very passionate about the fact that we never commit anything to memory anymore because, you can just look something up on your phone, no problem. And as soon as, an EMP goes off, or as soon as we don't have our phone, what is going to happen to society?
Right.
And that's a scary thought to think of too. So I think curiosity and wonder is one of the most important virtues that we can all have, is the action to still humbly remain ignorant to something and admit to yourself, like, maybe I don't know that. And maybe it's more beneficial that I seek the answer through like credible resources than just like Googling something.
Yeah.
So that I would say what keeps me curious is the action of consistently asking questions to grow rather than assuming that I know everything.
Olympian of Magic, Elliott Hunter. Tune in next time for more Filmmaking Confidential. It is totally free to subscribe, and when you subscribe, you'll get upcoming new episodes automatically, and you'll have free access to all our past shows. The Filmmaking Confidential podcast is a production of Dekanga Audio and produced by myself and Ella Spencer. Our original theme music is composed by Kevin Robles. For more of the Filmmaking Confidential podcast, head over to filmmakingconfidential.com. If you have a question about filmmaking you'd like me to answer on the podcast, send me an email using the contact form on the website. To learn more of my filmmaking secrets, be sure to pick up a copy of the book, Filmmaking Confidential, available on Audible, paperback, and ebook, wherever books are sold. I'm Steve Balderson. Thanks for listening and spreading the word. Until next time, keep making, keep doing, keep going.